Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's great to see you. We've been going through a red letter study. We're still sort of technically going through a red letter study, but we finished the Sermon on the Mount last week. And so I wanted to take this Sunday to kind of go in a slightly different direction, but it comes off of the Sermon on the Mount and where we left it, and see if we can put a little bit finer point on what it is that we were leaving ourselves with last Sunday. Last week we ended the message talking about the experience that changes everything. Remember we were talking, we showed a clip of the movie Contact, which we had seen the previous Friday in here. And the lead character there, the young astronomer Ellie, had an experience that she could not prove to anybody else. And yet everything in her as a human being was absolutely convinced that it was true, that it happened, and that it changed her forever. And yet there was no way to convey that, no way to transfer that, no way to convince anybody else. And it is such a perfect metaphor for the spiritual condition and the experiences that we have that we can't express to anybody else. And yet everything in us as a human being tells us that it's true and that it's changed us. And it's now going to be the foundation of all the decisions that we make from here on out. It's going to inform those decisions. It's going to give us a perspective of life. Everything has changed. We talked about how all of Jesus' teaching is geared toward funneling us toward having such an experience. It's not the content itself. It's not the data itself that is important here. It's using that and letting that, allowing that to bring us in, usher us into an experience that will change everything. And so the question then becomes, what is the everything that is getting changed here when we have this experience? And of course the answer is, it's our very worldview. It's the way we look at life. It's a perspective from which we understand the workings of life and understand our relationships with each other, with nature, with God. All of this. It's our understanding of the way things are and the way that we think things should be. All of that is what gets changed. It's the very air we breathe. It's the ground we walk on, because we don't view our worldview as a worldview. It's just the way things are. We don't even realize we're looking at the world through our worldview. That's what gets changed. But it's interesting what Marianne said a few minutes ago, and kind of what some of the prayers this morning have been about, and even some of the lyrics of the songs, is that even after we have that experience, right? The next morning you wake up and you make your coffee and you live your day, right? And life is still a lot of work. Life is still a lot of pain. Life has trauma attached to it. Life is senseless much of the time. In fact, we could even say that life is absurd when we look at it. And where is the meaning in life? We keep looking for meaning in life, and it keeps eluding us. Even after we've had such an experience, life continues on the way it always has. What are we going to do with that? The ancient Greeks had a metaphor for the way that we experience life, and it's the myth of Sisyphus. And if you're not familiar with Sisyphus, Sisyphus was a king and credited as being one of the cleverest humans, or the cleverest human who ever lived. He ended up cheating death twice, right? Got to come back to life after he was beat by cheating the god of the underworld. He cheated Zeus, and he had, just run rings around the gods and done all this stuff. And so the gods finally got him and punished him. And how did they punish him? They put him in the underworld, and he had to roll this heavy boulder up the side of a mountain. And right when it got to the top and he was going to hit the summit, it would roll back down again, and he had to go back down and do it over again and again and again and again for all eternity. Keep rolling the boulder up to watch it roll back down again. If that is not the metaphor for life, what is? And the interesting thing is that this was written, some 2,500 years ago. And the way that people were experiencing life then is the same way that we experience life now. Don't think that just because we're modern people that we have anything up, that we're any more intelligent, or we experience life differently than the ancients. We don't. Read what they wrote. They're experiencing life that just touches our day-to-day existence. This is how we feel. I'll tell you what, I get to the end of Sunday, I've done all the schoolwork that I need to do, I've done the message here, I've done the music. I get one afternoon to just kind of, and then Monday morning, the rock's back down at the bottom of the hill, and you start over again. Isn't that what we do? This is life. And we can have these experiences that change everything, but it doesn't change the fact of life. Now, there's a French philosopher by the name of Albert Camus. What is it with the French anyway? If you look at his name written out, it's Albert Camus, but Albert Camus, it's like, all those wasted consonants. I don't know. It's just, Camus is credited with being the father of absurdism. Absurdism is a branch of philosophy that basically is saying that life is absurd. Okay, what does that mean when we say absurd? What he's meaning in a philosophical sense is that life is neither rational nor irrational. It's simply unreasonable. Okay? Now, unreasonable. What do we mean by unreasonable? Well, if you have an unreasonable person that you're trying to deal with, you can't reason with them. You can't rationalize with them. You can't riddle them out. They don't make any sense. There's no meaning there in what they do. So if life is unreasonable, then we can't riddle it out. We're not going to be able to reason, coax out a rational meaning in life because it's not there. Life is absurd. Now here's the thing. If you really believe that, if you really believe that there's no meaning in life, then life is really not worth living. Is it? If there's no meaning to everything we do, we're simply rolling the hill, the stone up the hill, having to come back down, and we do this over and over with no meaning. Why is life worth living? And Camus recognized that there are only two reactions that we can have to such a human situation, human predicament. And the first is suicide, just simply kill yourself. The second is to generate some kind of hope, right? Hope. But he saw that as both a form of escape. To any absurdist, especially Camus at the beginning, both of these, either suicide or finding some way of hope, is unacceptable because it's a cop-out. For him, any kind of hope would be an illusion. And any kind of suicide would just be giving in to despair. It was an escape. Both of them were escapes that solved nothing. The truth is, to him, the fact is that life is absurd. To deviate from that in any way, to claim that there is some reasonableness in life, that you could derive hope from, some meaning, would make him a liar. He would lose his integrity, and he would lose what he calls his innocence. Interesting choice of words there. And so he resolved not to allow his desire for meaningful or even a spiritual life push him from what he called the dizzying heights of anxiety. Whoa. I mean, it's just so foreign to the way we think, right? He didn't want any desire for hope or for meaning or spirituality in his life to push him from the dizzying heights of his anxiety. But his anxiety, he defined as a deep awareness of the actual absurdity of life. So he wasn't going to take any leap of faith, and any belief that he couldn't verify, he couldn't prove by his own experience, he was not going to allow into his life. So he's just like Illy, right? The astronomer in Contact. Everything had to be proven empirically. Everything had to be proven scientifically. If it couldn't be, then it didn't exist. And Camus is working on the same kind of principle. And so then you would probably say to yourself, well then, if you really believe that, then why not suicide? Why not just kill yourself? And he found this ingenious third way through. He said that life still has value, even though it doesn't have meaning. It still has value in the constant, conscious revolt against the lie of reasonableness, against the lie of meaning. Maybe this will help. He says Sisyphus, and we in life are only tormented because we're conscious of the absurdity of life. We're conscious of the futility of everything that we do over and over again. Because we're aware of this futility, that's what torments us. I mean, I think about my dog, and those of you who have dogs or cats, or especially dogs, are perfect. Every day at 5 o'clock, this dog is ready and knows that it's time to go out and go for a walk. And so she comes up and she starts whining and she's giving me those eyes. And as soon as I walk over, pick up my shoes and drop them on the floor, that's her signal to just go absolutely crazy. And she's yelping and barking and running up and down and doing all that stuff. She can't wait to get out. It's the same walk that we do every day at 5 o'clock to do the same things that she does every day. And yet it's as if it's the first time and she is just so excited to do it. If she had the awareness of the futility of these little walks, it wouldn't be the same experience anymore. Now, would it? It's interesting. It's the awareness of the futility that is actually the source of the torment for us. And he says, when Sisyphus is pushing the rock up the hill, he's just part of the rock. He's part of the whole experience, and he's not really thinking. But when he gets to the summit and the rock rolls back down again, he has this moment, this pause, this breath that he can take. And then he has the trip back down the hill to get to the rock again. He said in that moment, it's a moment of lucidity. It's a moment of clarity where he can understand what's going on. And in that moment, he says, Sisyphus is happy. Sisyphus is happy because Sisyphus can be conscious of the absurdity of life. And that's what gives life value. All right. I don't know about you, but that might sound a little absurd in of itself, right? Is value the same as hope? Maybe it's close enough. We'll have to see. It sounds absurd, but the truth is that every one of us needs meaning in our lives. That's Viktor Frankl. He's the one who's really came down. Meaning is absolutely essential because out of meaning we get hope. Now, here's the interesting and ironic thing. Camus finds meaning in non-meaning. He finds value in the conscious and constant revolt that allows him to maintain his awareness of absurdity. And so, yes, is that value that he gets from that the same as hope? Maybe it's close enough, maybe it's not. But spiritual people find meaning in the metaphysical, in something that is extra-physical, something that is beyond just the physical, something that is unseen, something that's intangible. And there is hope then in life beyond just the physical life that we are living right now. And that infuses meaning in everything else that we do as spiritual people. But still, whether you are taking an absurd viewpoint or whether you're taking a spiritual viewpoint, both viewpoints must still accept life on life's terms. And what is that? Is that life is not going to give us any answers, any rational answers to the question of meaning in life. You can ask life all day long, what is the meaning of life? And the best answer you get is, 42 from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? There is no rational answer to this. And now, that itself may sound anti-scriptural to you, not in line with Jesus' teachings and Jesus' sayings, but I want to remind you, Jesus never answered a question, never answered an existential question. He didn't answer much of any question with a rational answer. He always pointed back to an experience that would change everything, right? Go back and analyze Jesus' conversations with anybody in the Gospels. They ask him a question, he gives them back another question, or tells a story, gives a parable. He's trying to focus and funnel the people into an experience that will answer their question, but not in a rational way. It'll be experiential. And not only that, the Bible has 2 absurd books in it. Did you know that? And we want to talk about one of them today, but the 2 books are Job and Ecclesiastes. These books are based on the absurdity of life. And you know the story of Job. Basically, here's a righteous man who there's a scene in heaven at the very beginning where God and Satan make a wager, basically, that Satan believes that he can make Job curse God and turn away from his righteous ways if he just applies enough pressure at the proper points. And God lets him do it as long as he doesn't kill him. And then Job loses everything, his own health, his family, his children, his livestock, all his holdings, until he's just sitting in a pile of ashes, and 3 friends come along. And at first they just sit quietly with him for 7 days, kind of like sitting Shiva, really beautiful. But then when they open their mouths, they blow it, because they're trying to make meaning, right, out of the whole situation. And what do? They're blaming Job. You must have done something wrong. Otherwise, all of this stuff wouldn't have happened to you. And he protests that he didn't do anything wrong. And then finally, he's protesting directly to God. And God speaks to him from the whirlwind and basically says, I'm God, you're not. Get over it. There's no answer from the whirlwind. Of course, in the last few verses, Job is restored to everything plus that he had before. But here's what I want to have you think about. Most scholars believe, through internal evidence and the way that they can date ancient manuscripts, is that the very beginning scene of between God and Satan in heaven and the very ending scene where Job gets all his stuff back were added later, maybe centuries later, to the book. Now I want you to think about Job just being a righteous man who suddenly loses everything and at the end gets told nothing about it. End of story. See, that is what really is speaking to this absurdity of life, this meaninglessness of life as we experience it. And yet at the same time, Job never gives up on God. Job never does curse God. Job never does deviate. Whether he gets his stuff back or not, there's something in Job that holds him, even though life is what life is. But I really want to spend time on Ecclesiastes because that's going to give us a lot more, I think, bang for the buck here. So let's just read right at the very beginning of Ecclesiastes 1, verses 1 through 18, and let's just take a little time here. First of all, the words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. The word there for teacher is koheleth, which in Hebrew means gatherer or assembler. And just as a side note, this is a feminine word. The gatherer, the assembler. It's very much connected to the word for wisdom, which is also feminine. Wisdom was always shown as female or feminine in the scriptures. And so even though we're talking about a male king, the word koheleth, the word teacher or preacher, as it's often translated, is feminine. You get that for free. Just thought I'd throw that out there. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And the word there, havel, in Hebrew means vain or futile or just mere breath would be one way. It's kind of like the fog that you put on your window and then it just goes away. Means no purpose, no profit, all right? Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the people of old. And even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Wow. Uplifting book here in the Bible, right? So at the end of a long life, Solomon, the king, the teacher, Koheleth, is remembering and reflecting on a life of absolute accomplishment in every aspect of measurement. In any way that you could measure Solomon's life, he had the nth degree. You know, whether it was land, whether it was wives, whether it was wealth, building, everything was the nth degree, this life of absolute accomplishment. He has tried everything in order to find this meaning in life. Chapter after chapter, he goes through the list. The first one is pleasure. He's gone after pleasure, hedonism, right? To try to find meaning. And when that didn't work, then he went into great works and was building and accomplishing things. Then there was the acquisition of wealth, the acquisition of power, and then the acquisition of wisdom. And one by one, he realized nothing matters. Nothing brings a sense of meaning to life. Because as he looks around, he sees that everyone has the same end. No matter what you do, no matter how much you accrue, no matter how much you know, no matter how good you are, everyone has the same end. The wise and the foolish, the rich and the poor, the happy and the sad, the accomplished and the lazy, the righteous, the unrighteous. Everyone dies the same death. Evil is rewarded. Goodness is punished. It sounds brutal, doesn't it? But look around at our lives. Look around at our world. Has it changed in 3,000 years? Sounds depressing. Sounds defeatist. You know, it sounds just wrong on so many levels as we read something like this. Because what we really have to come back down to is, does anything matter in life? How are we supposed to move through this? Do we, like Camus, have to come up with some ingenious third way in order to keep breathing? To feel that life is still worth living in some way? So Koheleth, the teacher, finds no meaning in anything that he's accomplished. He sees no meaning in the endless parade, right, of days and years and generations and seasons and everything that he sees taking place around us. But like Camus, he finds a meaning, an unreasonable meaning, but he finds a meaning in life. And this unreasonable meaning that he finds, just as Camus did, can't be reasoned out. It can't be explained. It can't be rationalized. It can't be put into words. It can only be experienced. Never proven, never transferred to anyone else. But it is still there. He finds an unreasonable meaning that gives him hope despite the non-meaning and absurdity of physical life. And of course, he's going to do this spiritually, unlike Camus. But he still accepts life on life's terms. He accepts the absurdity of life. And he builds his way of living life on that foundation. He doesn't deny it. He doesn't avoid it. He doesn't stick his head in the sand. That's the genius of Ecclesiastes. Hits it head on, accepts it all, and builds a foundation, a spiritual foundation on that, but still accepting reality as he's experienced it. What I want to do is read you another take on meaning making, and let's see if we can reconcile these as well. This comes from John Eldridge. Years ago, wrote a book called Wild at Heart, and even though it was specifically for men, I think what he's talking about here is going to apply equally to all of us. He writes this: several years ago, I was thumbing through the introduction of a book when I ran across a sentence that changed my life. The author shared a piece of advice given to him some years back by a spiritual mentor. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. I was struck dumb. Suddenly, my life up to that point made sense in a sickening sort of way. I realized I was living a script written for me by someone else. All my life, I had been asking the world to tell me what to do with myself. Or often we're asking God to tell us what to do with ourselves, right? This is different from seeking counsel or advice. What I wanted was freedom from responsibility, and especially freedom from risk. I wanted someone else to tell me who to be. Thank God, it didn't work. The scripts they handed me, I simply could not bring myself to play for very long. We are in constant danger of being not actors in the drama of our lives, but re-actors. To go where the world takes us, to drift with whatever current happens to be running the strongest. Reading the counsel that author gave to my friend, I knew it was God speaking to me. I set the book down without turning another page and walked out of that bookstore to find a life worth living. Now from here he goes on to talk about that he went back to grad school against all odds and got a graduate degree, and he has since become a writer and a lecturer and a counselor, and that he's changing lives in all those ways, and now has written this book and a success story, you know. And so he intervenes with all of that stuff. And then he finishes with this. Most men, women, spend the energy of their lives trying to eliminate risk or squeezing it down to a more manageable size. If it works, a man succeeds in securing his life against all risk. But he'll wind up in a cocoon of self-protection and wonder all the while why he's suffocating. If it doesn't work, he curses God and redoubles his efforts and his blood pressure. When you look at the structure of the false self that men and women tend to create, it always revolves around two themes: seizing upon some sort of competence and rejecting anything that cannot be controlled. As David White says, the price of our vitality is the sum of all our fears. White talks about the difference between the false self's desire to have power over experience, to control all events and consequences, and the soul's wish to have power through experience, no matter what that might be. If you had permission to do what you really want to do, what would you do? Don't ask how. That will cut your desire off at the knees. How is never the right question. How is a faithless question. It means, unless I can see my way clearly, I won't believe it. I won't venture forth. What is written in your heart? What makes you come alive? If you could do what you've always wanted to do, what would it be? You see, a person's calling is written on his true heart, and he or she discovers it when he enters the frontier of his deep desires. To paraphrase that advice again, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, because the world needs people who have come alive. Such a different tone than Ecclesiastes, right? And I want to point out that Eldridge was only 41 when this book was published. Only 41, okay? So he's still at the beginning of his life. He's looking at life from a different perspective. And like all self-help books, you know, they're always written atop a mountain of accomplishment, aren't they? The person who's writing the book is someone who has made it, quote unquote, someone who has had all these successes. And of course, the implication is that if you, dear reader, will do everything that I did, then you can have the same results that I had. But that's not the way the world works, does it? There are people who work just as hard as Eldridge did and don't have those successes to show for it. Don't have the notoriety, don't have the bank account, don't have those things, because life takes the turns that life takes. Yeah, hard work and dedication counts for much, but not everything. He was only 41. No one would buy or listen to his advice if he hadn't made it the way that he did, right? But because he made it, that skews the perspective. That implication that anybody can do what he did if they just follow the program. So if you work hard, if you do everything you're supposed to do, and you still don't achieve your outcomes that you desire, or the ones that you think you should have, or the ones that you think that God sent you to accomplish in the first place, where is the meaning then? It's easy to find meaning in your accomplishments when they're there, but what if they're not? This passage appears focused on accomplishment, and we can chalk that up for him being young and maybe still in the first half of his life. But if you really look deeper at what he's saying, he's really talking about following your bliss. Following your bliss. Doing what makes us come alive. And that's a very different statement. Now, for so many Christians, the idea of following your bliss sounds selfish. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be doing what the world needs us to do. We should be doing what God wants us to do. We should be sacrificing, for others and all of that. And so following your bliss sounds like it's too, turned inward. Selfish, as we said. Self-focused. But really, isn't that what we're here to do? The question is, what gives you bliss? We need to figure that out. And then follow it, because all things being equal, we're not going to shine any brighter. We're not going to come alive more than when we're doing something that we just feel we were wired to do, born to do, that we do well, that we love to do and can't wait to get back to. That's a rock we can't wait to roll back up the hill, right? Because it doesn't feel like work anymore. Some of you know what I'm talking about. I see your heads going up and down. If you've had the experience of finding something that you just love, that's your bliss. There's nothing selfish about that. From that point of view, from that blissful point of view, you will be able to give more than you could ever give any other way. That's not the only way that we can give, but there's nothing wrong with following the bliss, doing what makes us come alive, and that's a different statement. Now the question is, can we reconcile Camus with Eldridge and Koheleth? Can we bring them all together? So let's get back to Ecclesiastes. The central question that the prophet is asking, the preacher, the teacher is asking, is at verse 3. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? That's going to be the main question he's asking. Isn't that a main question of life? Why do I do all the things I do? What is it I'm supposed to do? What's my bliss? But in the end, what do we gain from all the labors that we do under the sun? What I want to do is give you a little walk through 8 of the 12 chapters, just pick little verses here and there. And I think Alex is going to be able to keep up with you on the screen, but they're also in your handouts. So starting at chapter 2, verse 24 and 25, he's going to be answering this question over and over and over throughout the entire book, chapter by chapter. Look what he says here. There is nothing better than for a man or a woman than taking meat and drink and having delight in his work. This again I saw was from the hand of God, who may take food or have pleasure without God. Right? There is nothing better for a person to do than taking meat and drink and having delight in his work. In chapter 3, verse 12, I am certain that there is nothing better for a man to be than to be glad and to do good while life is in him. And for every man to take food and drink and have joy in all his work. It is a reward from God. Verse 22, chapter 3. So I saw that there is nothing better than for a person to have joy in his work, because that is his reward. Who will make him see what will come after him? We can't see that. Chapter 5, 18. This is what I have seen. It is good and fair for a man to take meat and drink and to have joy in all his work under the sun, all the days of his life, which God has given him. That is his reward. Chapter 9, verse 4. For him who is joined to all the living, he or she who is joined to all the living, there is hope. A living dog is better than a dead lion, connected to the living. Verse 7. Come, take your bread with joy and your wine with a glad heart. God has taken pleasure in your works. Have joy with the woman of your love all the days of your foolish life, which he gives you under the sun, because that is your part in life and in your work, which you do under the sun. Whatever comes to your hand, to do with all your power. And finally, chapter 12, verse 13, this is the last word. All has been said. Have fear of God and keep his laws, because this is right for every person. God will be judge of every work with every secret thing, good or evil. So here he is trying to answer that central question. What do people gain from all their labors which they toil under the sun? And if you really look at this and you analyze what it is he's saying over and over again in different ways, what seems like fatalism is really liberation. This is what frees us. Having tried all his life to find meaning through external means, right? All the doings and all the accomplishments and all the acquisition, he realizes it's all havel. It's all mere breath. It's a chasing after the wind. It's nothing. He finds finally meaning only in what is immediately present, what is right here and right now. But this is what anyone can do. It's what we all can do. There is no prerequisite for this, right? He recognizes that everyone is equal in death, which is what kicked him off into this line of thinking anyway. But what turns out is we're all equal in meaning as well. We're all equal in death, but we're all equal in terms of meaning. Because the results of our actions are not meaningful. Only our engagement in the process is meaningful and has meaning. What is meaningful is our engagement in life. Engagement in every moment and whatever that moment happens to be presenting. That has meaning for that moment, in that experience. That's what he's trying to tell us. And we're going to still work hard. It doesn't mean we just give up. Obviously, we're still going to work hard. In fact, maybe we'll work even harder with this perspective than the one that we had before. But the difference is that we'll begin to know why we're working. Not just for some reward out there, but something different. Because it's not about accomplishment. Meaning is not in the accomplishment. It's about each connection point along the way of the process of whatever it is that we choose to do. And I do believe that God doesn't care what we do. Deeply cares how we do what we do. But each connection point along the way. Follow your bliss wherever possible. Why not? Why not, right? Do what makes you come alive as much as you possibly can. Not for some future reward, not for some result that you are setting as your goal. Because each moment of life is all and the only reward that there is. Does that make sense? The moment itself is the reward. There is no future reward, just this. That's why Jesus kept saying, if you do your religious rituals this way, you have your reward in full, because you're looking for something future. But that's all you're going to get. The real reward is in losing yourself in the moment. This is why at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he said, hey, it's not those who have done prophecy in my name. It's not those who have cast out demons. It's not those who have, built all these accomplishments and done miracles in my name that are going to be able to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's those who know me, who know their God, had that experience that changes everything. So that meaning comes not from some supposed rational source that is just a chasing after the wind, but from something absolutely deeper. something we will never be able to explain and never be able to prove to anyone else. And Koheleth then ends everything. He says, everything else has been said. What does he end with? He says, fear God and keep God's laws. That sounds like we're going right back to fear of punishment and obedience, right? And how much have I pounded on that one? But let's realize that keeping God's laws doesn't mean simply obeying the code of the law. Simple obedience. You can't obey your way into kingdom. Keeping God's laws literally means to live as God lives, to value what God's valuing, to write the law on your heart, as Deuteronomy 6 says, so that everything that you do comes out as relationship, as oneness, as leaving people better than you found them. That's keeping God's laws. God's laws are what? Jesus boiled it down. He said, love one another as I have loved you. That's it. Love God with your whole heart and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. The rest is commentary. That's keeping God's laws. So make sure that we don't go right back to thinking we got to obey every jot and tittle. That's not what this is about. And now fearing God. I know that we've gone over this over and over again. Fearing God is never about being afraid of punishment. Ever. 1 John 4 tells us straight out. If you're walking around in fear, you're not perfecting in love, because fear is about fear of punishment. There's no punishment in love. There's no afraidness in love. There shouldn't be. If we're really in love, there is no fear. So what is this fearing God business? Well, it's an idiomatic expression, right? It means basically three things: a silent reverence, radical amazement, an affectionate awe is the way that I would summarize. Silent reverence, radical amazement, affectionate awe. It's allowing yourself to move out of the rational, out of the need to control, out of the need to define, and allow yourself to have an experience that you will never be able to express in a rational way. Your meaning will be unreasonable, but it will be no less convincing, right? When we have that experience that changes everything, what we feel is silent reverence, radical amazement, and affectionate awe. And what does all that feel like? I'm telling you, it just feels like gratitude. It's gratitude. What else can we feel in a moment like that but gratitude? To live in gratitude is to live in meaning. It's all right here. It's all right now, within this day, within this moment, within this generation, because if it's not right here, then it doesn't exist. Not in any meaningful way to us. It has to be right here, right now, all the time. I wanted to end with one little bit. Someone emailed me who was having a really hard time with a lot of issues like this. And I'm just going to read my reply. Hang in, my friend. I can hear the fatigue and fatalism creeping in. Happens to all of us. But with all the loss you've gone through, don't give up. You have so much to give with all you have been through and all you've studied and know of our God. Keep giving it away. Find the joy again in the smallest things. I'm realizing that's really all we have, no matter who or where we are or how much we've attained or not attained. In the end, when we turn out the lights, it's just the little things. Either we see God in them or we don't. Kingdom or not kingdom. I've spent so much time focusing on the wrong things, or better, focusing on things for the wrong reasons. Ultimately, I don't think it matters what we do. I don't think God cares what we do. It doesn't survive with us anyway. But God cares deeply how we do what we do, the manner, the love with which we do whatever we choose to do. As I enter the last phase of my life, the things unaccomplished have begun to weigh on me. A sense of inadequacy, missed opportunity or mission. Depression has been hitting more often, pressure to turn things around. Some may look at me and wish they had a platform like mine to work within. And I can do the same looking at someone else. None of that matters. I know this, but I still fight it as well. Emotionally, the fear is still there, but at lower levels. Now I just keep reminding myself of what Jesus was really telling us. This moment, this detail, this person I'm with is the most important bit in the universe. The rest doesn't even exist until I get there. Who will remember any of us past a generation? And if they remember us through writing or buildings or whatever, they're not really remembering us. They're remembering products we produced. Not the same thing. Everything we are and we're created to be is momentary, like music. It vibrates in the air for a few moments and then is gone. If we can focus on the vibrations right now, always now, it changes us. I'm slowly changing, getting more comfortable with my circumstances, realizing my accomplishments or lack don't define me at all, especially in the eyes of those who love me most and the God who loves me all. We won't ultimately find meaning, know why we're here from our accomplishments. It can't happen. The meaning is not there. But if we can learn to value the connection and the oneness in each tiny detail of life, then we find meaning in everything we do. And it's going to be an unreasonable meaning, one that we can't put into words, but with the power to absolutely convince us. And that's as good as it gets. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the stark and ruthlessly brutal honesty of a book like Ecclesiastes, contained in your canon, contained in your sacred book. Thank you for the wisdom that wrote it, and thank you for the wisdom that included it, seeing how it fit in to our experience of life, but also our experience of you. Help us to put the two together without diminishing either. Life is what it is. You are who you are. We need both at the same time to form the foundation of our way back to you. So help us to do that, Lord. Help us to keep both alive in our hearts and in our minds, not diminish one that will take us off course. We love you, Father. We want to live as you live and love as you love. Help us to do that day in, day out, more and more. And never let us forget we can only do any of this because you loved us first. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's all stand.